Today on LA Currents, we focus on the County of Los Angeles and talk to some of its key leaders to explore the unique relationship between LA City and County. Dr. Barbara Ferrer tells us about her role running the LA County Department of Public Health and how messaging to the public has changed, as well as how the environment factors into overall community health. Later, LA Currents catches up with District Attorney George Gascon, who talks about the challenges and daily operations of being the chief prosecutor at the center of LA County law enforcement. But to start, after a distinguished career at the Long Beach Police Department, Robert Luna brushed off thoughts of retirement and instead ran for sheriff of LA County. Now, a year on, Maria Hall Brown sat down with him to hear more about the issues he faces leading the largest sheriff's department in the United States.
So today, I stand before you wearing this brand new uniform, and now I have a badge to go with it, with an incredible amount of pride and respect. Pride because it's the same uniform and badge worn by the sheriff deputies that patrolled my neighborhood where I grew up. And yes, I did grow up in East Los Angeles. Because of them, or because of you, when my friends played cops and robbers, I always chose to be the cop.
Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, what do you do after retiring from running the second largest police department in LA County? How about running the largest sheriff's department in the United States? I am delighted to be joined today by Sheriff Robert Luna. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I state your name.
I, Robert Luna.
What prompted your decision to retire from Long Beach PD, but then take that precious retirement time and run for LA Sheriff?
When I was concluding my career, looking at some of the challenges that I saw from the outside at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, great men and women, but I just felt they had some leadership challenges. And I wanted to step up to the plate. You don't complain about something unless you want to do something about it. And I felt that I could take this department where it needed to go, and that's the next level.
I want to thank the voters of Los Angeles County for electing me as the 34th sheriff and entrusting me with a very clear mandate to bring new leadership and accountability to our Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
One of my priorities is to make sure that our employees have the best training available to them as possible. Mm-hmm. Right now, we don't. We're deficient in some of those areas. So I'm going to be working with our Board of Supervisors and identifying all of our training needs. We have to be able to go out and look for opportunities of how other people are training best practices and bring them here to the Sheriff's Department.
I'm going to bring up something that may or may not be something that's fun to talk about or easy to talk about with this whole smash and grab thing. I think people are surprised that there is no punishment for these crimes that seem to actually hurt people, but it's nothing that law enforcement can really do anything about because the law sits in a particular realm.
Well, there needs to be accountability. When you look at criminal justice reform, I understand there needs to be a balance with over-incarceration and things of that nature, which I deal with now as the sheriff.
Sure.
When you're dealing with issues of like zero bail, if you don't commit a serious or violent crime, you may be cited and released, booked and released. That is something our community is going to have to deal with. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the crime rate. We have to look at the perception of fear. And right now, a lot of people don't believe we're safe. But yet our crime stats show that crime is down. So it is our job not to scare people, but to educate people, share information with them. But please remember this, that when we're talking about criminal justice issues and crime, the police are only a percentage of part of the equation. We have the district attorney, We have the city attorney, we have the judges, we have public defenders, we have incarceration both at the county level and at the state level, probation officers, parole officers. I mean, there is a whole pie to some of the challenges that we face.
You, as Sheriff Robert Luna, is there a line in the sand that you will not tolerate something from one of your deputies?
Once in a while, there are situations that come up, and I believe that we have good systems in place that end up holding our employees and our supervisors accountable when things don't go right. Although sitting in my seat for 8 months, part of what I've been doing along or through the Office of Constitutional Policing is making sure that all of our systems, our processes, our policy are not only up to standard, but beyond that standard. I will support our men and women if they are going out there every day and doing a great job, which, by the way, 99% of our employees do on a daily basis. Sure. I will support them. But this job is, I will challenge anybody, one of the most difficult jobs that are out there. I believe we need to support our deputies and police officers when they make mistakes. But if somebody comes out and they are acting or behaving in an unconstitutional manner, they're way out of policy, they're breaking the law, public trust is so paramount in the job that we do. I cannot accept that, nor should the community. But again, I ask our community members, please support your local sheriff's department, police department. Support us. We have wonderful men and women that come to work every day, put it all on the line physically and mentally, and they do amazing work every day. Once in a while, you've got to check yourself and not be afraid to allow people in to say, hey, can we be doing something better, differently? Because I think if we're not always trying to get better, we're going to fail. We can't be afraid to change. And law enforcement has been in a constant state of change for the last several years. And again, I would challenge that as a profession, we probably look at ourselves as much or more than anybody else. And we're held accountable to a very different standard than most other professions or people as individuals.
You talked about relationships, and I know that you've built relationships over your decades of law enforcement, but now you're in this position, and you're in a leadership position in a very unique environment. LA, there's nowhere like it. And so how is it going with others? I know you've stood with Chief Moore, and how are you doing with all of the other components that actually wrap around the mission of all of these organizations for public safety?
We can't do this job on our own. So when you talk about somebody like Chief Moore, who I have an amazing relationship with, I could pick up the phone and call any chief in LA County because that is about relationships and there's building trust over time, and we help each other out in this county like I don't believe or I haven't seen in other places. So those relationships do matter. That goes for if I need something from state DOJ, calling the Attorney General, Rob Bonta. Or this morning, I spent several hours at the FBI office up in Los Angeles talking about Homeland Security challenges, the ATF, the DEA. It could go on and on. When we need help with an issue to protect our community, it's not about silos, it's not about egos, and that's what I've learned over my career, that it's those relationships, those partnerships, that collaboration that is key to keeping our community safe.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't actually talk about what you need in terms of recruiting, because there is that opportunity for people to actively get involved in this new visionary sheriff's department, and I imagine that you probably are looking for great candidates that want to be a part of the team.
We are, and I want to start off by saying that I have been blessed. I have spent 37 years doing this job, and although it is very difficult at times, it is one of the most rewarding careers anybody could ever have. Okay. It's a family, greatest job in the world, We are a little short-handed right now. Our employees are working their tails off, but I invite you to visit lasd.org/careers. Come and serve the community. Come and make a difference. We're waiting for you.
As director of the LA County Department of Public Health, Dr. Barbara Ferrer has become a familiar face behind a $2 billion budget, over 5,000 employees, and services to the 10 million people who live in LA County. She spoke with Maria Hall Brown about the work of the department and its impact on our well-being.
I'm delighted to be joined today by the director of the LA Department of Public Health, Dr. Barbara Ferrer. So nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Maria.
Just even doing my research, it seemed incredibly overwhelming to think about what the Department of Public Health is responsible for. But in general, obviously, you know, we'll get to the enormous issue with the pandemic, but it is so much more than just that. What are the things that you focus on?
There's 4,500 employees, there's almost a $2 billion budget, and we have a huge mandate to make sure that everybody has the resources and opportunities they're going to need to be as healthy as possible. We're really focused on sort of an equity agenda. You know, we all used to think it was about going to the doctor, and that's an important component, don't get me wrong. But so much of what determines our health and our well-being is really rooted in the conditions in which we live. You know, a good example is, 25 years ago, the Public Health Department may have done a huge campaign telling people how important it was to eat healthy. Well, we know that, yes, it's super important for us all to eat healthy, but your ability to eat healthy depends on your access to affordable, healthy foods. So you're going to see a Department of Public Health like ours making sure you have access to affordable, healthy foods, trying to get rid of what we call those food deserts. We're going to worry about climate change. We've got to get clean air. We need clean water. We got to get the lead out of our soil. So you'll see our Public Health Department really working on all fronts. We want the conditions where you work, where you live, where you play, where you pray, to all really contribute to your overall well-being and to contribute to what we call community health.
And it was those issues that actually drew you to the position in the first place.
Yes, I mean, I can't imagine being anywhere else now than in LA County. I've so benefited from the richness of the expertise that lives in our communities, among our residents, among our community-based organizations, our faith-based organizations. You know, the truth is, when you think about a public health infrastructure, many people just say, oh, that's your health department, your public health department. No, that's all of those organizations and people that came together, especially during a pandemic, during COVID. We witnessed this firsthand, that make it possible for us to get the kind of information we need. To have trusted messengers, to have over 2,000 vaccination sites in the county within months of getting vaccines. That's because of all of those partnerships with all of those organizations.
The issue still exists. So where are we and how are we? I mean, are people still dying from COVID?
Black and brown people still tend to have higher rates of cases, hard to measure now, but higher rates of hospitalizations and higher rates of death than everybody else. We also see that people who live in communities that have higher rates of poverty, same thing. Now we're averaging about 1.5 deaths a day. I mean, you all remember when I reported 300 deaths in a day, 400 deaths in a day. So things are so much better. One thing we learned is we have to protect workers. If there's one place where I feel like we missed at the beginning, it was understanding the disproportionality that was going to play out amongst workers, especially our essential workers, who were never going to go home, who couldn't really distance, who worked in crowded conditions. So for me, the work ahead is, let's improve ventilation. We know what a difference good ventilation is going to make, not just for COVID, for other health issues, other respiratory viruses.
What was your core value that you maintained?
Yeah, I think it's the most important question about who I am and how I can do this work. I believe that we're all here to take care of each other, and you heard that from me over and over again. But in taking care of each other, my job is to make sure that we're paying attention to those people who are most vulnerable, for whatever reason. It could be they don't have enough income. It could be they live in a community that's isolated and they don't have good access to resources. In the case of COVID, it could be that you're just old or you have some serious underlying health conditions. I always had to remember, how will this decision impact people who are the most vulnerable for having a bad outcome if they get infected with COVID? The second value that for me really plays an important role always is transparency. I don't want people to second guess about why we made a decision or what that decision is or what we think the impact of that decision is. And I want you to have the same access to information that I do. So every data point that we used to help inform decisions, we tried to put up on the website. And we tried to put it up in a way that would allow everybody to be able to see it and understand it. But our information's powerful. And most of the information I have doesn't belong to us at the health department. It belongs to all of you. It belongs to everybody who lives here, who works here, because that's the information we're collecting. And I want to make sure that people could see that information as well, so you could understand what were some of the data points that might be driving our decisions.
How are you? I mean, because not only have you had to deal with this, you've had to answer to it, you've got an enormous amount of attention on you, and you personally, you professionally, you at large, in an incredibly tense, at sometimes, fraught with peril experience. But in front of me now, you're relaxed, you're gracious, you're optimistic. But this has got to have been really rough.
I mean, it was rough for everybody, let's be honest.
Oh, but you were in the front line. You were standing there.
I was in the front line, but I never was alone. So, I really want to emphasize that. There were many lonely points, but I was not alone. I have an amazing team. I have an amazing family. I had amazing support from the vast majority of people who live and work in LA County. I know there was a lot of attention paid to, sort of people who may have been attacking me or may have been, questioning us, may have been disrespectful at times, and at times threatening. But that was not what was happening most of the time. And so I don't really want to give it a lot of weight.
Got it.
Because I think the harder issues for me and for my team were that we lost so many people. And that took a lot of coping skills. If you ask of what hit me the hardest, it was knowing how many people died.
Thank you for your courage, and thank you for your candor and all of these things. Beyond, obviously, the pandemic and COVID and all the resources that are available, you also ask something of the community.
So yes, there's some things we ask people to get involved in. If you think you've experienced food poisoning, please report to us. If you've gone somewhere where you think the health conditions are poor, please report to us. I think the other kind of ask that we have is get involved with us as well. So right now we have a hands-only CPR campaign going on. This allows every single person who lives in LA County to very easily learn the life-saving skill of hands-only CPR. And it's easy to do, it's easy to learn, it takes about 10 minutes. We have sites all over the county where we'll train you. We'd love to have at least 500,000 people trained by the end of this year. Everyone can get involved in that.
And if people want to get information, what is the site?
So people can go to publichealth.lacounty.gov.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferrer.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
3 years into his role leading the district attorney's office, George Gascon has just issued his own midterm report. He tells us about the daily operations of the DA's office and the collaboration necessary to work with over 40 other law enforcement agencies throughout LA County.
Well, he was sworn in December of 2020, promising bold reform. And today we're going to check in on how things are going. I'm delighted to be joined by District Attorney George Gascon.
Hello,
nice
Maria.
to have you here.
Maria, so good to see you. Because the pursuit of justice must be timeless. And that is why we will work to correct the injustices of the past.
You just put out a midterm report for this year, and you outlined several key areas and outcomes. What do you consider to be the highlights of that report?
I think the highlights of the report is we're seeing crime beginning to go back down to pre-pandemic periods. So it's very rewarding for me to affirm the fact that we said from the very beginning that, public safety and reform actually travel together and they can be complementary to one another. During the time when I was sworn in, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and nationally we saw an increase in crime. And unfortunately, it coincided with my being sworn in and the implementation of a lot of this reform. And now seeing crime going back to pre-pandemic period, I think is incredibly rewarding for me, and it's an affirmation that we're on the right path.
Handling cases that should not go to jail/prison, especially when it comes to addiction or self-imposed harm. How are the opportunities presenting themselves for alternate therapy, for alternate help? How is that policy and process? Are there alternates being put in place for the amount of people that need that help?
We're working very closely with all the stakeholders, including law enforcement as well as community-based organizations and our board of supervisors, to increase the capacity to provide for the intervention that is appropriate for people that have mental health issues, substance dependence, a combination of two. We continue to be challenged, of course, with the not sufficient resources, right? So much of what we deal with is impacted by mental health. If you talk to anyone, would tell you that easily at least 40% of the people that are in county jail every day have some level of mental health problems, some of them very acute. And often our prosecutors are faced with really poor options, right? We have somebody that cannot be released on the street because they may be dangerous at that moment or they have other issues. We recognize that they have a mental health problem. The best place for them would be a treatment facility that has, that is a secure facility, but we don't have ability for that sometimes, and then we end up sending the person to jail. It compounds the problem, though, because not only is the jail not the place to deal with this problem, but then we also are facing a jail overcrowding problem, right? So the sheriff, on the other hand, is facing the reality that he has to release people, sometimes even if he may not want to, because we're over capacity every single day. So it becomes a very delicate dance.
So what safeguards are you putting in to understand the difference between who should be released and who shouldn't be released? Because frankly, that's a huge focus on the office at large.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that in our business, mistakes are made every day.
Sure.
Right? We have a recidivism rate that is somewhere around 70% system-wide. And I'm not talking about LA District Attorney's Office, I'm talking about as a nation, right? So every time that somebody reoffends after the system touches them, it's a failure, right? So it's really important to understand that unfortunately we deal with, number one, we deal with human beings, which predicting behavior from human beings is often is hard. And we come from a place of a tremendous amount of imperfection, right? So I think the baseline is a baseline of imperfection, right? Not a baseline of perfection.
And let's go to the juvenile sentencing,
Right.
and that a juvenile should stay in juvenile court despite the level of his crime, her crime.
So this is really an area where it's really important to understand the science and understand the effectiveness of our work, right? 95% of the people that we send to prison or jail are coming back out. When you take a 15, 16-year-old and you put them in a jail setting, generally, when they come back out, and generally they come back out, they're still very young and strong, they don't do much better. So it's really important that we understand that, the human brain is not fully developed until we're into our mid-20s. And I jokingly say that when it comes to guys, until we're in our 50s. But,
I'll agree with you there.
Yeah, thank you. But the point is understanding what the right level of intervention. And that's not to say that a juvenile will never be tried as an adult, and we have done some. But that should not be the rule. That should be the exception, and that should be driven by a whole host of considerations. Not simply the crime, but the state of mind of the individual, level of maturity, the circumstances around the case. There are many things that play a role in that.
Locking up kids has never been shown to enhance public safety, but has been shown to significantly increase a young person's likelihood of committing future offenses. Locking up kids doesn't help, it hurts.
Where are we with the juvenile detention system? Has there been inroads to be able to improve that so that when you do make those decisions and you put those individuals into the juvenile detention system because of the crimes that they have committed, are we creating a better human, or are we just holding a person and letting them go and see what happens next?
We have a severe problem with our juvenile probation, and we have seen some people are calling it gladiator school, right? I mean, the way that kids are being thrown into a setting, poor supervision, just lack of resources, very little rehabilitation. We are at a crisis moment in the county. The governor made a decision a few years ago that the state was no longer going to be in the business of holding juveniles that were serious offenders in the state system. And the concept was a good concept, to bring it back to a community-based treatment and custody. Unfortunately, because of often political bickering, quite frankly, about not in my backyard, where do you put the center, how do you build it, we now are here. These kids, the state now has basically released everybody back to the counties. Some of these kids have severe problems, and they committed very serious crimes. And we are really at a crisis mode now. I have to say that by and large, the Board of Supervisors are working really hard trying to correct this, but this is trying to fix a flat tire while the car is going 100 miles an hour downhill.
Are you a different man sitting here with me now than you were when you took the oath on December 8th?
Maria, I don't know if you remember this, but I think I mentioned the fact that I continue to evolve every day. I talked about my own evolution. And I am definitely a different person today than I was 2 years ago. And I would hope that when you and I get together a year from now, that I would be a different person today. And here's what I mean by that. I'm not talking about principles and your basic ethical compass. I think that, in my opinion, needs to be very well centered, and it should be constant. But I believe that it's a hallmark of a good human being to continue to learn, to be reflective, to learn from past mistakes, to seek new information. And clearly I have done a great deal of growth and learning in the last 2 years, and I would hope that it will be the case a year from now as well.
So if people want to find out about this work and get to know you more and get to know your office better and understand what issues and policies are active and being done by your office, best place?
If you just Google Los Angeles District Attorney, you're going to see our website will pop up. You'll see all of our policies. Also, you're increasingly seeing our dashboards that actually show the number of cases that are being filed, the cases that are being presented by the police, what the conviction rate. So we're putting more and more information out there. So I encourage people to go there and take a look.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.